Yo everybody, what's going on? This is Keegan from Kman Reviews. If you enjoyed this review, make sure you hit that like and the subscribe button, and if you have any opinions at all you would like to share, go ahead and leave them down in the comment section. Declan McKenna, Zeros. Declan McKenna, English singer, songwriter, someone whose music I have really fallen in love with over the past couple months. I was aware of him all the way back in 2017 when What Do You Think About the Car released, but never got around to actually listening to his music until the viewer suggestion this year that caused me to review that debut album, which, if you're curious, there will be a link in the corner for you to go check out that review. During that time when I was covering that debut, I caught wind that there was going to be a sophomore album later in the same year, and lo and behold, it was true, as that's what we're here to talk about today, the sophomore album, Zeros. After loving What Do You Think About the Car, I had very high hopes going into this album despite not hearing any singles before fully checking out the album. So what do I think about Zeros? Let's find out as I review this album track by track. We'll start off with the singles, with there being 4 of them, the first one being Beautiful Faces, which is a little bit of a different change-up from his debut. He's really leaning into the retro tropes from a couple songs off his previous album, songs like Mind, which unfortunately were the songs that stood out to me the least, so already off the bat, it wasn't seeming strong. However, to my surprise, this track is pretty enjoyable. It's slightly haunting in its instrumentation, the playful synth melodies combined with the harder, glossier drum playing. It all provides for a very eerie experience as he's singing about young people struggling in the modern world and how intimidating the whole journey can be. Great song. The second single, The Key to Life on Earth, is probably one of the catchiest tracks on this entire album. The drums are immediately captivating, presenting a nostalgic yet still welcome thumping rhythm. The guitar work takes a backseat to the synths, fully committing to the retro aesthetic, but what really sets this track apart from the others is mainly the rougher breakdown and the grand, climaxed outro. Lyrically, the track seems to deal with hostility between different social classes in suburban London. I think it's a fantastic song, probably one of my favorites here. The third single, Daniel, You're Still a Child, is a little bit of a slower tempo tune, but it more than makes up for that in its grandiosity. There are plenty of retro synth melodies here, but the drums are the true ringmaster of this track. Everything kind of orbits around this slow, pulsing melody. Declan's vocals aren't the most stellar on this track. I think a song like this could have benefited from eccentricity, especially that chorus could have used some nice soaring performances. Lyrically, I get a lot of David Bowie influence here, as it tells the story of Daniel being alienated from society unwillingly, being pushed away and lost. I've warmed up to this track quite a bit. Good song. And the fourth and final single, An Astronaut, is probably my least favorite of all these singles. This one I really get a full David Bowie influence on in basically every element. This instrumental feels like a more hectic, synthesized, and expensive version of Space Oddity. He even mentions the character Daniel again, supposedly the same Daniel who was present on the last song I mentioned. So there is clearly some concept going on here as he sings about recalling old childhood memories. I feel like this track is trying to be spacey and ethereal, but it kind of just comes off as cluttered to me. Not my favorite. Pass. Now for the rest of the tracks. The opener, You Better Believe, really kicks the album off with a bang, or should I say a loud pounding drum section. Afterwards, the true instrumental kicks in with a strong guitar riff, piano, and Declan's vocals, which seem very cookie-cutter for the genre. There are some nice, higher, powerful performances, but there's also some pitched, robotic effects, but for the most part, it's all fairly okay. Lyrically, Declan actually mentioned what it's about, literally an introduction to this world he's trying to create that's very damaged and foreboding. It's a fine song, but it doesn't resonate with me as much as I'm sure it was intended to. Emily is probably my least favorite song on this entire LP, and from the very first note, it sounds like an old Beatles ripoff with the fluttering acoustic guitar, to Declan's voice just having that old tone to it, especially pulling out the falsettos during the verses and when he harmonizes with himself. Lyrically, it seems like it's just another standard relationship song, dealing with this girl who ended up lying to him. It just comes off as really generic, and in comparison to the more conscious and experimental track this album has offered and will offer, it just falls so short. Hard pass. Twice Your Size opens up rather calmly with this warm, dreamy acoustic guitar, light drum melody, and ethereal synths. This one's another one that kinda fell through the cracks for me. There's very little here that stands out in all honesty. It almost feels like it could have fit snug into his debut album without the childish timbre and voice cracks. It isn't a bad song at all, just almost a little bit forgettable, but not as much of a distasteful pastiche as Emily was. If I can say some positives here, I do really like the gigantic closer this track has, aggressive drums, almost blown out guitar, and Declan hollering. It's a healthy change. Lyrically, it seems to be a track about climate change, environmentalism. Not a bad message and not a bad song. Gonna need some time to warm up to it though. Rapture has a solid groove to it from the get-go, although I personally could have done without the robotic vocal pitches at the start. Thankfully, that goes away when the verses start up, which are pretty solid. Definitely remind me of The Key to Life on Earth, but with a much more prominent and shrill guitar. The chorus is probably my least favorite part of the tune. The obnoxious la-la-las and the unpleasant falsettos all the way throughout, but I mean, at least the groove holds firm. Much like Twice Your Size, this one also ends in a rather noisy fashion, with these almost laggy vocals that are just shrieking. It's not as enjoyable as Twice Your Size's climax, in my opinion. In fact, it's much more cacophonous. Overall, though, it's a decent song, certainly a highlight of the non-singles. Sagittarius A, however, is probably my favorite of the non-single tracks here. There's something so sincere in the simplicity of this track, especially in its instrumentation. The drum work really taking the reins with its simple yet captivating groove, plus the synth work that really holds strong in the background. The melody is weirdly entrancing all the way along the track, and Declan on the chorus sounds the most distinguishable he's sounded on here in a while. Lyrically, it's using the analogy of Sagittarius A being the black hole at the center of the Milky Way, pairing that with corporate higher-ups using their power to assert dominance, pulling the market, or even people, in some cases, down with them. Great song, I enjoy it. And finally, the closer, Eventually Darling, certainly does its job justice as a closer. It feels very sweeping, very grand as a whole. I really can't see this being anywhere else on the album. The piano, the synths, the light electric guitar. These pitched layered vocals, however, are a little bit of a turnoff. They don't blend in at all with the song. As a whole, though, this track is another one that doesn't really stand out in my opinion. And that especially comes through with Declan's vocals just being as flat as they are. Lyrically, it's about loss and change, with the world changing at a faster rate than we can keep up with. It does come off as a bit milquetoast. Not really for me. Pass. Overall, for a sophomore album, it definitely could have been worse. Some solid grooves, tunes, and only a couple of tracks that kind of let me down. I may not love this record, but I do appreciate and commend Declan for a slight artistic divergence from his debut. My main concern is that Declan listed this as some sort of concept album, which I personally think gets kind of lost behind the music. It just kind of feels like traditional Declan McKenna, like back on his debut. Regardless, still enjoyed the album, so I'm feeling a 7 out of 10. Well guys, hope you enjoyed that review. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.